Welcome, everybody, to the podcast. So I don't have a ton, but the thing that came up last week and then has been elaborated on. So Jordan Peterson was banned from Twitter. Mm-hmm. He made a YouTube video about it.
I watched it.
Did you watch the whole thing?
Or just most of it?
Part of it, yeah. So we've talked about this in the past, but he was banned from Twitter, for those of you who don't know, for a tweet about Elliot Page, where he referred to Elliot Page as Ellen Page and said that a criminal doctor performed a removed breasts or something like that. And then he made a YouTube video breaking down that tweet, why he suspects they got rid of him. And do you have a sense of it before? Like I have rough thoughts around the topic.
Whether his tweet had, like whether his argument had merit or whether the ban had merit.
Wherever you want to start. If you don't want to, here's my.
I haven't really spent a lot of time.
So my general thought is like,
it.
Twitter. I don't know. This is the thing that kind of gets weird. Is you see this, I guess, with a lot of issues. You see the conservatives and the liberals flip flop principles depending on which side they currently find themselves on. And I feel like Twitter is a private company that has the right to ban people for whatever flippant reason it wants to, and if its rules aren't consistent, tough shit.
Well, is that true for a platform?
So this is the caveat, which is I do think that there's an I don't think it's fair when people say Twitter is the public square, because it's not. Because I'm not on Twitter, and I still feel like I have a pretty influential ability. So perhaps social media together forms the public square, but Twitter is one small section of that public square. So I don't feel that being banned or removed from Twitter is akin to being censored, in my opinion. And I think certainly for Jordan Peterson, he came out, made that video, got 2.5 million views on YouTube, was allowed to say what he said. And I don't think that this doesn't make me fear for free speech when it's a single thing. Where I get more nervous is the Alex Jones type situation where everybody within 24 hours says, you're not allowed on. And then when he comes on Flagrant, they take down the Flagrant 2 podcast. And he is effectively, that to me is kind of a removal from the public square in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that is true is that these companies flip-flop between being platforms and seeking the protections of a platform, like not being responsible for the content that people upload, and being
publishers.
Publishers who censor or edit or control, and they take it upon themselves to tell you what's true and not true. And maybe we need to change the laws or something like that, but the way they currently operate doesn't fit the law as far as I understand it, where they can pick and choose when they want to be a publisher and when they want to be a platform.
I'm down for that. I do like that there could be some sort of third hybrid categorization that would give them...
they might just have to update the law. I'm not saying that the way that they operate is necessarily flawed. I'm saying the way they operate doesn't work with the current laws. So someone should look at that. Instead of what we've been doing is kind of going, well, that's okay because the people who would prosecute this kind of agree with the behavior of the corporations for now.
Yeah.
So they're going to turn a blind eye to what is inconsistent behavior in terms of what their legal identification is.
Yeah. Well, I could imagine like a hybrid, which is like, look, you want editorial power over your social media platform. Therefore, we're going to raise the stringency with which we prosecute like copyright claims, all of these other things. You're going to be liable if you don't get them down within a set period of time. So if you like this and you want to editorialize and you want to control and add COVID precautions and say that people can't dead name or do all this kind of stuff, you're going to be held to a higher standard, still below what like the New York Times would, but a higher standard in terms of liability for the content on your platform.
Yeah, the truth is it might not be feasible for them to.
And then so they would have to then go, okay, well, we have this other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That to me is the big. That's just the inconsistency I see is that they do whatever they want. When it's convenient, they're one thing. When it's convenient, they're another thing. So, and Jordan's position is an odd one. It's similar to the abortion one in the sense that depending on where you fall philosophically, either this is the most important battle for free speech ever, or this is completely inconsequential and he's making a huge hissy fit big deal about something that's just general politeness, like you wouldn't tweet the N-word and then get upset when black people got upset. And it's like, well, depending on what your philosophy is, you feel very strongly that he needs to be protected and fight this fight, and what he's doing is protecting our most fundamental right, or he's a total dick, way out of line, needs to just learn to chill.
Yeah. Well, so for the original, I'll show my cards personally. For the original C-16 bill, where he expressed fear that there would be compelled speech and he didn't want it entered into Canada's legal system. Mm-hmm. But when asked, he's like, I have never denied a student when they've asked me to switch their pronouns or call them by a different name. I actually liked that argument. I was like, let's make politeness a social standard, but not a legal one. Mm-hmm. And then what he did on Twitter, which is target someone that he doesn't know, who is above 18 years old, and say the name that they don't want to be called by and the pronoun that they don't want to be called by, and call the doctor a criminal, seemed to run very contrary to what he said. And I was like, that was something I thought. He definitely disturbing.
He definitely has shifted his position on the issue. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he's talked about why, but certainly he used to, when he was climbing to fame, say, anytime someone asks me to, I'll give them the name that they want or the pronoun they want. This is about the legal protection of not having compelled speech. And he seems to have shifted to social compelled speech is also unacceptable to him, except for, obviously not in all cases, because I've never heard him drop an N-bomb.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it does seem like he's shifted his position, and I haven't heard him talk about why.
Yes. And
also funny for a guy who came back from like a medical coma and said that he didn't want to be in the spotlight because he didn't like all the negative energy around it. He does seem to be hunting negative energy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what his position is, but I think there's probably ways to go about it that involve less social media negative backlash, if that's what you want to avoid. And I'm not saying he should avoid it. I'm saying he said for his own mental health and well-being and the well-being of his family, he wanted to avoid it.
Yeah.
And that seems to have shifted as well, because now he's definitely summoning it with open arms.
Well, that's what I found socially, not legally, not whatever, like disturbing about the tweet, which is to target someone that you don't know with something that you know is upsetting to them, that has and to not include, for instance, all of the doctors and all of the people, and the fact that for, I don't know, 30, 40, whenever they started, boob jobs, women have been, we lived in Las Vegas, the number of doctors putting needless silicone implants into breasts is far greater than the number, and not helping the underlying psychology of these women. And we had experiences that it wasn't, and they were addicted to plastic surgery. Maybe I've missed those tweets from him, but he seems to have passed over those plastic surgeons in his, calling them criminals and being upset that they're not addressing the fundamental issues.
Well, that's the one part. That's the one part he did say, wish he hadn't said criminal, because it's technically not illegal.
Fine, but where is the ire? Because we've had needless plastic surgeries that are pushed by the media for many, many years to the detriment of young women.
Yes,
and it's called breast augmentation.
Yeah, some of those plastic surgeries are fine, and some of those come from a place where they'd be much better off with
Brazilian
the
butt
mental
lifts,
help that he seems to think is what's necessary in other cases.
And maybe, and I could be wrong, maybe he has a history of criticism of, the Kardashians and the standard of beauty that they've put forward.
Doesn't his daughter have a bunch of plastic surgery?
I don't know if she does, but it appears that she's got some lip stuff.
Yeah, so I don't be surprising if he had a position that was anti just general beautifying.
I think if you have a problem with the medical procedures being, and I could see this problem being I'm concerned that young girls that are confused about their gender identity and sexuality will think that that these drastic surgeries that are sometimes promoted without a counter argument to hey, this isn't right for everyone. This isn't going to solve all of your problems. That could be dangerous for young girls. If one sees that in the trans space, but not in the rest of American society, I wonder if that person is unduly focused on the trans space and not actually concerned with young girls. And that is, I'm not saying that that's the case, because I don't know his entire history of tweeting about these issues, but I would expect parity there.
Yeah, I imagine if you're against transitioning until 18, you're probably against implants until 18, tattoos until 18.
But he's not about 18 because this is not what happened in this case.
Oh no, like, sorry, I was just saying for those people.
Yes.
I imagine there's a large group of the population that just says in general, don't do permanent body augmentation before you're 18.
Yeah. Well, then the other tweet, which was just, I thought like needlessly mean, was about the Sports Illustrated thing where he says, not beautiful, and I'm not going to pretend that it is, of, I forget her name, who's on Sports Illustrated. And then when asked for follow-up, I think it was in this video, or I don't know if I read it, so I don't know if it was in this Twitter video. It was like, I am not going to sacrifice the ideal of athletic beauty to whatever, the neo-Marxists. But the idea that Sports Illustrated has ever, I can show you some things. Do you know who David Wells is? Mm-mm. David Wells is a pitcher who pitched a perfect game. He's undeniably, well, this is actually argumentative. Is he an athlete? Is a good question, because he's built like your uncle who, drinks too many beers and like grills out all the time. He's not an ideal of athletic beauty, at least from the aesthetic sense, but he did pitch a perfect game. Mm-hmm. He's on Sports Illustrated. The swimsuit edition, whoever, Naomi Campbell or Tyra Banks or Kate Upton, nobody checked if they were athletic. They were just culturally informed beauty standards, which, by the way, have shifted over the 20 years since it was like super skinny Kate Moss all the way up to more buxom Kate Upton. We've had these shifting standards of beauty that have both been reflected in Sports Illustrated and pushed by Sports Illustrated. And then to call this out as like, oh no, I care about athletic beauty because that's what Sports Illustrated swimsuit represents, that's not what it is. It's just a cultural reflection of or pushing of some kind of beauty standard. So I thought that it was a weak argument to justify attacking and being mean to a stranger. Like if you're not attracted to her, fine. I think I'm not attracted to that person all the time, but I don't tweet about it.
Yeah, it's also interesting because we've gone from like the government to platforms to just a magazine. I feel like if you don't want to support that, just don't buy that magazine. I promise if Sports Illustrated saw sales tank to 10% of what they normally are, they would let that inform future magazines. Yeah, I did think it was interesting, especially given, like, I don't know, he's got a wife, he's got a daughter. How would he feel about someone with a big platform just being like, they're ugly? I imagine he would say, hey, that's rude and unnecessary.
They don't conform to the ideal, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mostly with the magazine I guess I don't find that person attractive, but I also don't care who's on the cover of magazines. And maybe he thinks that it's a battlefront for a greater fight. Maybe he thinks that if he allows people he finds unattractive to be on magazine covers without announcing it, that somehow that will be the rise of fascism. But yeah, I just don't care who's on the cover of any magazine. I don't care who wins Sexiest Man of the Year. Mm-hmm. It should have just been Brad Pitt 20 times in a row, and instead they would slot in other people. It's not a big deal. Like, it's a confusing battlefront. I actually don't even see where that one's coming. At least, especially with his early stuff, I understood the idea of, I don't want the government to pass any laws that compel speech. It's like, okay, I understand you're trying to avoid being like North Korea and China, and I see the slippery slope here. I'm unclear on the slippery slope of magazine covers. I personally just don't care who's on the cover of any magazine. Yeah. Forbes. I'm sure Forbes they had the Theranos woman on I'm sure at some point on the cover. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a battlefront I don't understand the importance of.
I think you're actually losing the battle when you argue, for instance, about who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated or who should win the Oscar, instead of doing what you're saying, which is recognize that these are meaningless except for the meaning vested in them by people who argue about should get it. So stop being a person who argues about the cover. Don't buy the magazine. Don't talk about the magazine. Don't watch the Oscars. If you want to, I watched Parasite. I thought it was a great movie. I'm glad that I did. But like, I also went to see Top Gun in theaters, and I don't care if it wins an Oscar. And I had a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny. People, I guess that's just how my brain functions, which people don't often do, is just voting with their money. Like, they'll decry Bezos but go on Amazon. And if I hated Bezos and I hated Amazon, I would try to just shop from bestbuy.com for my electronics, whatever, clothingstore.com. I would stop going to the place that I don't like.
Well, it's almost worse than that in the case of Sports Illustrated because they are selling magazines, but what they're really trying to grab is your attention. So when you pay them attention,
just to be clear, couldn't tell you who's on the cover of this.
Who was on last year?
Yeah.
And do they all conform to the athletic ideal? Are they all beautiful? Or are we just like the? I don't know. If I were talking, I'd be like, this is not the fight. This is not it. Twitter has convinced you that you need to take a position in what is a never-ending culture war. Who cares? This is not important. People are going to have standards of beauty will shift. People will not be persuaded by a magazine cover. And if they are persuaded, beauty is not an ideal that is fixed that we need to defend so hard. But he's lost me in the going after individual people who are not in contact with you, who are just living their life as best they can and are maybe confused and are maybe confusing other people. But guess what? That's all of Instagram is a bunch of sad people making people sad by posting about how they're really happy, doing things that don't make them happy. Like the problem is so much bigger. So to focus uniquely on what he sees as the bad example being set by trans people makes me raise an eyebrow.
Yeah. I wonder why, because I could think of so many possible reasons. Like one, he's been fighting this fight for so long. I wonder if his interactions with trans people are abnormally vicious, and so that he has developed stronger negative feelings over time. I wonder if his meds have just shifted from when he started to when he was in a medical coma to today. And I know that could have just gone on different depression medicine or anxiety medicine. And it could have completely changed how he feels about things. Like it could, I would be curious, and we can never know where the shift came from. Because I do agree, he used to. Even when people would insult him, he would smile and people would be attacking him and his students that supported him would come to his defense and cut them off. And he'd say, no, I want to hear you fully and then I'll respond. He was so measured.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. It's a passage of time. I'm sure we all change. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely been an evolution of sorts for Jordan in terms of how he presents his ideas.
Yeah. And if it's not clear, I'm not, I don't like it. He can do whatever he wants, but I don't find it admirable as I did some of his prior positions and the way that he handled Cathy Newman. You know, like I thought that was admirable, and this to me is not. So,
yeah, I'm thinking back to the video. I think his argument is that he worries that Elliot will inspire other people to do this who wouldn't otherwise have transitioned if they didn't have people to look up to.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
No, it's just, I don't know that there's merit to that or not. I don't know. It's hard to imagine having never felt trans. It's hard to imagine seeing someone transition and then being inspired to have transitioned to a woman personally. But that's his fear, is that I'm just thinking through the video that somehow people who wouldn't otherwise have felt body dysmorphia will somehow like be inspired to feel like they don't belong in their body, which I think is just a teenage experience in general. It's to just feel like you hate your body.
Yeah. If one wants to make that argument, I don't see why a particular person needs to be brought in, because the truth is I don't know enough about Elliot. I don't know if that has been a good move or a bad move or has improved mental health or decreased it. So I can't say, but that decision I do believe is beneficial and right for some people. So what? Some people are not allowed to talk about Jordan Bennett. It's funny because he went into a medically induced coma. What if that inspires more people to go into medically induced comas to kick a drug thing that would better be kicked with therapy, right? And you talked about how it was helpful, or the carnivore diet and how it's been helpful. Like everything that we do that we feel has a positive impact on our life could potentially, if we're in the public sphere, influence other people to do that thing. And some of them, like going into medically induced comas or taking drastic steps to perform surgery on your body, are dangerous when done by the wrong person and will make their life worse. So I guess, to mention that this is not right for everybody, put a caveat on some of these stories, fine. I think that's reasonable. But that doesn't seem to justify the personal attack that he did. So, I don't know. it's,
Yeah, I'd be curious to talk to him. I don't think we ever will. I have a lot of questions.
Mhm.
Like, is this where you think that you can do the most amount of good in the world?
Mhm.
Why is this your issue? You know what I mean? Why is this the fight you choose? I understood when it was the Canadian legislation. So yeah, but I don't know the answer. I have, and all this does is make me wish I knew questions that I have to ask.
Well, I mean, and from a distance, with a hypothesis that we won't have this conversation, but I would go in, and I'm trying to be transparent, is that you seem very angry, and you seem like you're taking the anger that you have on the inside and you're putting it on the outside. And I don't know that the outside is where the anger needs to go or was triggered from. Like, and that has been a shift in how I have perceived you, at least. So, all right.
I had one more thing just related to body stuff, which it's funny that this came up. It's not groundbreaking, but it was just yet another reminder of how rampantly we are hypnotized to have body dysmorphia. Because we both saw Top Gun. There's a shirtless scene where they all play football together and the dudes look jacked, but they don't even look unattainably muscular. They're not Chris Hemsworth in Thor. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's what those guys look like. And then I just happened to get fed by YouTube a couple of Top Gun videos, and that scene involved being heavily oiled up and doing a ton of lifting between every take. So they're just constantly doing push-ups and bicep curls between every take, flexing hard every scene. And that's fine, but what it just makes me realize is, oh, this actually is an attainable physique to walk around with, but you guys aren't walking around with it.
Yeah.
And it's just made me realize how unavoidable it is to get a warped sense of what people look like, because you've got Instagram where people have lighting, angles, filters, literally Photoshop. Then you have all of the Marvel movies where every single person basically has gone on steroids, but no one talks about it. The Rock denies aggressively having ever done any exogenous steroid or testosterone, I think. Hugh Jackman, from the first X-Men movie to the last, is a hilarious transformation. And then you've got the Top Gun guys who are just doing it in a small way, not necessarily steroids, not necessarily Photoshop, just by working out before every time the camera goes on. And I don't really have a takeaway, except for it's just a shame that people won't just be honest. Hey, this physique is attainable as long as you do steroids. Hey, this photo is completely fake. I actually have a ton of acne that I've gotten rid of. It would be so good for the mental health of everybody, including the people on camera, but they think they would make less money or be less famous, so they're not willing to take that trade. And I don't really have a takeaway. It's just, we're just realizing more and more how unavoidable it is.
Yeah. Well, I don't think tragedy of the commons is the right word, but it is like a game theory thing where, look, if we can all be honest, we'll all be better off. But as soon as one person defects and adds a filter or flexes before or does whatever, they're at an advantage.
Yeah.
So now, if you're not cheating, you're not even competing.
Yeah. No, and I think the other thing that I thought was really interesting, because I was thinking about this a little bit, is you can know that in your mind. Everybody is filtered, steroiding, flexing beforehand, and it actually doesn't do much to stop a lot of people's subconscious insecurities. So they'll know that. And then they'll see the photo, and then they'll be mean to themselves internally because they don't match the photo. Even though intellectually, be like, do you think this is edited? You're like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Filtered, probably completely Photoshopped. Do you think that these actors are on steroids? Yeah, for sure. But then when they're watching it, if you could track their subconscious internal monologue, I think the majority of people still feel envy and internally are not nice to themselves because of this thing that they know intellectually isn't a fair comparison, but it doesn't stop the comparison. And that I thought was interesting, because even knowing that it's like that doesn't help in terms of how people feel about themselves. And
I feel that way not that I trust me, these days, I barely care. But I forget what, there was somebody that I saw, I was like, oh my God, I love that person. Like, you know, I was like very attracted, and then saw an Instagram reality and was instantly like, that was deflated quite a bit. And I was thinking about it. It's actually a positive adaptation, which is that I trust my eyes more than my concepts. So when my eyes show me something and I go, well, I know that's not real. It's like, yeah, but your eyes are smarter than your concepts. You know, like that's a good thing. You don't want to have your world too much imposing, except in this particular circumstance, you definitely do, because your eyes are not trustworthy, because we've put so much technological effort into making sure that you can't trust your eyes. But yeah, no, it's what you were saying about, that's all of Instagram. That's all of a lot of these platforms, just people making other people miserable by adding as many indicators that they're more attractive, life is better, things are better than they are.
Yeah, and I think making themselves miserable, because then I think they compare themselves to the person they've created on Instagram, and they just feel bad that they don't look like that all the time.
I got to get back there.
Yeah.
Which never existed.
Yeah. So I really think everybody's losing in terms of the mental health or self-esteem side of things. And for people, I mean, almost should go without saying for anyone who's listened for a while, I'm obviously hugely into health and fitness. I think people should play sports. I've been lifting weights forever. I think most people could have insane physical transformations and make themselves very attractive through diet and exercise and habit change. It is just a bummer that the people that are like leading them are so deceptive. Another one I've seen is the people who, have we talked about this on the podcast? They start out in good shape, purposefully get in bad shape by eating donuts every day, and then have 6 weeks transformations where they transform radically, but they just get back to where they were. So they've just been in shape for 3 years, and then they get soft and doughy for a moment with the worst diet imaginable. Then they just return to their old habits and get their old body back in 6 weeks. And they go, oh, if you give me money, you can go from here to here. But if you were in the out of shape part for 3 years, you don't get this in 6 weeks. And so then again, they're, in order to enrich themselves financially, setting a unfair standard for their clients, who then don't have those changes in 6 weeks and then probably quit thinking that they're failures instead of have been misled by a deceptive guru. And I think most people will go, oh yeah, that's true. It's just a shame because it's happening all the time. It's still happening. And again, people still buy it. People know that happens, but they still spend the money on the program instead of just committing to the year of eating right and working out or whatever it might be. So yeah, just saw a Top Gun video. It reminded me of the rampant body dysmorphia that we have in our society and how everybody's trying to trick you for their own financial gain, really, because I think mentally it's not good for them either.
It's not good for them, but I think they believe that it's good for them, if that makes any sense. Like the people who do the filters and the this and they squeeze their waist in, I guess the addiction is the best thing to compare it to, which is like this feels very good in the short term, though it becomes running downhill in the long term, because now you've got to like hide from real cameras to show. You know.
One of the Kardashians said as much. She was complaining, I think I talked about this on the podcast, she was complaining that social media has made her feel sad because people accuse her of Photoshop anytime she posts a photo. But she has Photoshopped tons of photos historically and gotten caught. And so it's just like, you're in a prison of your own making. I don't really know what else to say except for just stop posting on Instagram. It's not even stop Photoshopping. It's just like, if this makes you sad, just stop. You're rich already. You're famous already. You're married already. You have a kid already. You're good. You don't need to get this external validation anymore.
Yeah, and of course you're right. But
it's an addiction.
It's an addiction, which is like telling an addict to just stop goes about as well as you all know it does, which is they don't often do that.
Yeah, I think some addictions people are more comfortable saying, yeah, I'm addicted. So if you're a heroin addict, I think a lot of times people at some point will just go, yeah, I'm addicted and I know I have an addiction and that's where I'm at. And so what I'm trying to do is cure the addiction. I think a lot of times with these softer addictions, people will deny having them, which means that they won't necessarily do what's necessary to break it.
Yeah, and culturally, no one is going to point out or hold a mirror to how damaging this is to your life. You don't have, if you're, I don't know, an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, sure, you have probably a lot of alcoholic, drug addict friends, but you also see sober people that don't have the problems that you have. I think it's probably tougher for a lot of the people who are addicted to Instagram or social media to look to people around them that are not having the problems they have and see that, because everyone around them has all the same problems that they share with their addiction.
Sure.
Cool. Anything else?
Yeah. Sri Lanka's falling apart.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I was talking about it. So this, as of yesterday, they announced that they have less than a day's worth of fuel. I don't know if that came to pass or if someone bailed them out. I texted my Sri Lankan friend and I asked, is this American sensationalism? Is the media just doing this as something to focus on? He said, no, actually, I think that America is underplaying this because the situation was exacerbated by the Ukraine war and most of the media was pro-war. So, yeah, there's just a country that doesn't have money, that is struggling to get food, that doesn't have fuel, which means it can't operate their vehicles. No one's really talking about it. You know, got a lot. We talked about Jordan Peterson talking about trans for a while on the podcast. People are talking about other things that are important, Roe v. Wade, whatever it might be. But it is interesting how little we care as soon as something is just far away.
Yeah. Well, this to me is during the Roe v. Wade and before that something else, there's a contingent of people that go, if you won't take a hard stand on this, you're a bad person. I can't interact with you anymore. And it's stories like this one or the Tigray war or whatever is not being, or the water crisis in Africa that I have to come back to. Because for a moment I go, oh my God, I might be a bad person because everyone is saying this. And it's like, no. The world is full of tragedies. And not focusing on any one of them, unless it's undoubtedly the biggest, most important, world-ending thing, cannot make one a bad person, or else we live in a world full of only bad people because everyone is ignoring at least one, if not 99.999% of these massive issues. Did I not bring this up on the podcast, though? I thought I mentioned Sri Lanka. Did I?
You did. Things have just gotten worse.
They've just gotten worse, yeah.
Legitimately, as of yesterday, the claim was that they won't have fuel. They won't be able to operate vehicles. They won't be able to deliver food and supplies. And
societal collapse. So this is what there's a contingent of people in my sphere. The person I know that has most represents this is Tucker Max, who is planning for the collapse of American civilization. And what that means is moving to a place with a small group of people that he trusts, making sure that he has, well water access, diesel and solar power generated, ability to make all or hunt food, the ability to genuinely survive in a small band of, I don't know, the Dunbar number, maybe 150 or fewer people.
Well, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's easier to achieve in the U.S. Or some place like Australia. I think there are certain countries where
it's too densely packed.
I mean, to find a huge plot of land in the United States is not hard. You have to go to places that you might not seem optimal to you. But I drove cross country once, and there's just open fields, and I don't think every country necessarily has that luxury where you can say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay less rent, spend less money on a house, and get massive acreage that I can then turn into my own farmland. I don't know that that's an option for people in Sri Lanka unless they're extremely wealthy already.
I don't mean to suggest this as an option for those people. I'm saying as someone watching who does live in America, who lives in, we have enough gas today, but you keep seeing that Lake Mead is going down and the water level is shrinking. You keep hearing that we're going to run out of all this stuff, and who knows? Well, maybe somebody does. I certainly don't know. What is the level of dependence upon society that I am going to feel comfortable with? Right now, it is total. It is total. When the internet goes out, I scream. If it slows, I scream. Like, I am 100% dependent upon it.
I have a couple of canned fish cans. I'm basically starving to death starting 48 hours after we lose supplies.
When the power went out because of the windstorms a few months ago, I was bereft. I was absolutely lost.
Yeah. I'm saying I think starvation for me occurs 48 hours after the supply lines shut down. I have exactly 6 meals worth of food in canned food, and then it's starved to death time.
What about water? And so these are the things, it's the questions that I've been asking myself is long term, I don't know if it's going to be my generation, but certainly a generation of Americans, people in this potterland, in the future will experience a societal collapse because that is how the world works. This will, unless we just are done that, unless we've hit the end of history and it's only just get in your nap pods, enter the Matrix, and enjoy your filet mignon.
Is that because you think we're losing our number one empire spot, or just because you think over a billion years, you're just projecting so far in the future that eventually there'll be a societal collapse?
I'll do both. The one is easily defensible over a billion years.
Cede the number one spot in the world superpower order and not have a societal collapse. I think England did it.
Sure. I'm not betting that we will, clearly. But I'm wondering what mitigating factors I and others might take, how far I want to go, and where I've landed is...
Get comfortable with the idea of dying.
Yes. Well, I was like,
That's the easiest way.
A gun for myself.
Because otherwise, you got to learn how to farm.
Yeah.
You're going to have to raise livestock. People are going to come for your food, and you're going to have to kill them. Yeah. Or just be like, 14 days from now, probably just starve to death.
Easy to say now. I think probably in that situation, not very fun. Where I've landed is I'd like to be less totally dependent than I am now. I'd like a well, and I'd like to go, like, if things broke down, kind of like just as a taste, the beginning of COVID, when everybody went to the stores and cleaned out all the shit and the supply chain got fucked up and society hasn't collapsed, but your ability to be a consumer is greatly diminished. It's not roving bands of pirates yet, but it's, not Book of Eli, but still you can't buy the stuff that you need. I'd like to be able to weather that storm comfortably, meaning I've got enough water, I've got some food hung out, I've got a generator for my house for the necessities, and I can do a week or 14 days of like chilling, hanging out. But beyond that, where I get to is like the amount of skills that I'd have to learn in order to do that would be all consuming for me to get close to being able to do that in 18 months time. I'd have to start today.
You'd have to learn how to be a farmer.
Yeah.
You'd also have to learn how to fix solar panels.
Yeah.
You'd have to learn enough about agriculture to be able to make sure your well stayed clean.
But you know what might change is if I had kids, I could see that conservatism, fear, protection thing kicking in a bigger way. So I don't know, but yes, for me, I kind of go where you go, which is like, had a good run. Like it's been great. I lived in the best of times, and I made it pretty far.
Well, there's multiple collapses as well, because you could also imagine a slow enough collapse that the writing's on the wall, laws are starting to change.
Yeah.
Like let's say that Roe v. Wade is the start of a avalanche of laws that change that you don't like, and you're getting more and more nervous. Before the Book of Eli part comes, where everybody's roving around Mad Max style, you can leave the country.
Yes.
So I do, and I think that's if it happened today, that is the option I would go versus build a farm, because I don't have the skills and I don't feel particularly tied to the U.S. I would just try to get my family and friends, and we just go buy a cul-de-sac somewhere else that wasn't falling apart. Sure. And I'm not saying the U.S. is, but I've thought about it. I go, how much runway am I going to have to get to Australia?
Just to be clear, what that would mean is I'm going to open an Australian bank account. You know what I mean? And I'm going to have little gold ounce bars in my pocket. I've just thought of this for the train, like, please, sir. But yeah, those steps, which I actually could see myself taking those steps, which is like, the banking system in America is, and again, this I don't think is going to happen.
No, these are just fun hypotheticals.
Not fun. It's not likely to happen, but the downside of it is worth protecting against by opening an Australian bank account, and putting some money in there. So yeah, things like that. Just so if you show up, you can pay rent for 3 months or something. I don't know. That would be amazing. And I'm in a position to be able to do that, thankfully. Thanks, YouTube. It's not the podcast.
Podcast is how Justin is going to afford to survive.
Justin, you're in the S&P now, or you opened a brokerage account, right?
Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm in the S&P.
Okay, he's opened a brokerage account. He's not in.
What prompted that?
Ivan.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Anything else that you want to talk about?
No. That's it.
Very good. Justin, questions for the podcast?
And only one. Do you have any advice about things, emotional work, behavioral work, philosophical exploration, anything a person can do when they don't know if they can feel love? For context, I'm 24 years old, no significant relationships, 2 4 to 5 month long ones, first one at 22, and I thought I might have loved a couple of people in the past, but in retrospection, I think it's been mainly lust and or infatuation.
Well, that's not, I'll be honest, totally crazy. If anything, it's quite self-aware at your age. I think what people call love at those younger ages is often infatuation. It's like obsession, and I definitely relate to that. And then mixed with some lust. But can you feel love? I mean, do you have a family? Do you, I don't have exercises for this, but what I would say is you're undoubtedly capable of it. You're living, breathing, existing. Like you're certainly capable. You might have blocks to experiencing it fully in certain contexts because you don't feel safe based on your upbringing. And the things that I would recommend for that, the emotional mastery course that we have, I think week 2 would be very interesting for you, which is basically some guided meditations and they're not as much meditations as they are like thoughts and body scans. Could be very useful. Yeah, those would be the ones that I think of. And then a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, which would definitely make you, if you had an MDMA therapy experience, which is, I wouldn't recommend just for I want to feel love. I would come in a bit more targeted with something that you'd like to grow in or change in. But I think that would be a strong experience of like, oh, this is what an overwhelming feeling of love is. And then you could compare that to how you exist in every day. Do you have any thoughts?
I do. I think there's 2 potential situations this person could be in. So I will just try to clarify. I think there is what they described as I don't feel love in romantic relationships is right. They said I've been in 2 4-month relationships and I didn't feel love. So my question would be, do you love your mother or your father? Do you have a sibling that you love? Do you have a dog that you love? Have you felt love for a friend? Then I would say, how many relationships have you been in? How many women have liked you? Like I could imagine someone who says, I don't know if I'm capable of romantic love, but loves their mom, loves their dad, or hates their dad, but loves their brother or sister, but just hasn't dated a lot. They go, I can't find love. I go, yeah, you just need to become better at building chemistry. Because if you had dated 30 people instead of 2 people, you may have just found love. You may have just had 2 mediocre relationships and overall struggle with dating. So I'd say that. I'd say, yeah, you should really focus on charisma and just getting more experience dating people and options and people liking you. And I think you'll find that you fall in love. If you're someone who has, not only do I not find love romantically, but I don't love myself, my dog, my siblings, my mom, my dad, my grandparents. I've never felt anything that I could call love in my life. Then I think it's the emotional mastery stuff. But I couldn't tell from this question if it's a life problem or just a romance problem.
It was implied it's a romance problem.
Yeah, so in that case, you say, I've had 2 relationships, both were 4 months, and I didn't love the person. I go, yeah, you're 24, you've had 2 relationships, they lasted 4 months each. I think we need to 10x the dating experience. Like, you're not getting into a lot of relationships. So is that because you find it really hard to be physically attracted to someone? Is that because you find it really hard to like anyone of the opposite sex? Is that because people are not interested in dating you? I would go much more charisma-related tactical stuff if this is just an experience you have in your dating life.
Cool.
Nice. Let's move on to Patreon.
Patreon, what do we have?
We're going to talk about picking a direction for your career, how to stop being scared of public speaking, and then somebody had literally written in saying they can't tell if we dislike or admire Jordan Peterson anymore.
Oh, that's funny.
So we're going to elaborate on that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Cool. So if you guys want to check that out and we've done now probably over 100 of these. I think that's safe to say on Patreon. You can check all of those.
We're on like 80.
83. Okay, yeah. So not over 100. I'm sorry.
But that means there's over 100 hours of content.
Yes, there's plenty. And you get it at any dollar amount.
It's where the spicy stuff comes through. It's where we don't go hot take, but we go mildly hot takes on Patreon.
Yeah.
We feel safer.
So if you guys want to check that out and support the podcast, it is what keeps us going. It is our form of revenue that pays for Justin and the stuff that we have here and keeps us going. It means a lot to the podcast. It actually is the reason we're able to continue doing this, and without our patrons, we couldn't. So if you guys want to join that group of people, check these out. Any dollar amount gets you access to everything we're about to do and have done in the past. Appreciate you guys, and those of you who just watch the regular podcast, we'll see the rest of you over on Patreon. Peace.